Our top focus on Fineprint this hour is from Russia, where authorities have asked all journalists to take a day off today. It was an overly tense weekend with a full circle from a rebellion to a retreat. Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin started walking the opposite direction to Ukraine. He took control of a military headquarters in Russia and then threatened to march towards Moscow. He even said that Putin made the wrong choice. Soon Russia will have a new president. It was nothing less than a mutiny. Residents were asked to stay off the streets, tanks were rolled in, and President Vladimir Putin made a national address. Wagner faced no major resistance from the Russian troops. The Wagner mercenaries were marching along through towards Moscow. Experts now say that maybe Putin did not mean it when he said he will crush the mutiny, because backdoor talks with Belarus are already underway. And somewhere, Moscow knew that Minsk will be able to chalk out a plan, which Alexander Lukashenko did. He has been personally acquainted with Prigozhin for about 20 years. The Wagner chief called off the march, claimed to avoid bloodshed, but put forward his demands to Lukashenko in a phone call. A criminal case against Prigozhin for the armed mutiny will be dropped. The Wagner fighters will have immunity against taking part in the march. Fighters who did not take part would sign contracts with Russia's defense ministry.
So I think this then was his revenge against Putin, trying to expose Putin as being weak and not really having it all together. Both of them yesterday then had an interest in stepping back. I think from Prigozhin's point of view, he wants to be seen as a Russian hero. He wants to be seen as defending the interests of the state against weak leaders. And so he didn't want to be seen as attacking the state in Moscow. Putin, I don't think, had a choice. He did not have confidence that his own people would stick with him. So he had to offer Prigozhin a way forward, a way out, if you will, to Belarus. And now I don't think we've seen the last of this. I don't see how Putin can stay in power and have been shown to have caved to Prigozhin in this way. And therefore, I think he will go after him. And I think Prigozhin is counting on that.
Wagner is a private military group. It is not owned by the Russian government. The soldiers aren't paid by Kremlin, and the one controlling them is not Vladimir Putin. It is this man, Yevgeny Prigozhin. But throughout the last 16 months, Wagner has stood by the Russian forces, on occasions even fought better than the official military. Like just a week after the invasion last year, Wagner waged a brutal war in Popasnya. This was Russia's first major breakthrough. Then in May last year, fierce fighting took place in Severodonetsk. On the 25th of June, they took the fight to Lysychansk. At the time, Solidar became one of Russia's biggest gains. The fighting went on for 5 months. Then came the flashpoint, Battle of Bakhmut. This is one of the bloodiest and longest battles of the 21st century. This left Prigozhin and Wagner much stronger than any other paramilitary. But throughout the war, Prigozhin has not minced his words once. He has scathingly attacked Russia's military leadership, particularly Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and the Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov. He has never until this weekend burned bridges with President Putin. But many saw this chaos long coming. Critics are surprised why Putin waited for a full-blown crisis to address this crisis. The Wagner mutiny has ended, at least for now, and with it has ended the biggest threat to Vladimir Putin in the last 20 years. But this will have an impact on the war morally and on the ground. Putin has been able to douse the chaos, but he is loosening grip of a system which he himself built. Ukraine is already trying to capitalize on the turmoil. NATO is calling out Moscow for its big strategic mistake. European Union says cracks are emerging, but this is all external. This is bound to have an internal ripple effect, and history is testimony that bad wars have cost Russian rulers dearly. So is Vladimir Putin's fate sealed? And for more on this, we are now being joined by John Erath. He is a Senior Policy Director for the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation in Washington. John, good to see you and welcome to the broadcast. We've seen what has been happening in Moscow. Now the Wagner chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has moved to Belarus. What next for President Vladimir Putin?
It's very difficult to say what will happen next. It's at this point, it's not at all clear what has happened over the weekend. We're dealing here with people whose business it is to spread disinformation, lies, and propaganda as part of their normal operations. So it's very difficult at this point to sort through what is the correct version of events and what the clear implications are going to be for the future. Will this mean that Putin will emerge weaker or stronger? At this point, we still don't know. Where is Prigozhin now? That is also an unknown. He has not been heard from for almost 2 days. He was reported on the way to Belarus, but there is no evidence that he has done this yet. So at this point, there are still more questions than answers.
John, still talking about Prigozhin and his whereabouts, we do know that some of his communication tools like Telegram are seemingly or very quiet over the past 2 days. Do we know what deal was signed between Yevgeny Prigozhin and also the Belarusian president Alexander Lukashenko, and how it looks like?
We know very little for certain. It was reported that Prigozhin would be moving his base of operations to Belarus, that this was done with the intervention and support of Lukashenko, but the details are still unknown. It was also reported that some or most of the Wagner fighters in Russia and Ukraine would be transferring over to the regular Russian army, that they would be signing contracts. The Russian army employs contract soldiers as a matter of course. So the implication is that the Wagner fighters would become Russian contract soldiers, still doing what they are doing, but with perhaps a different patch on the uniform. But it remains to be seen how many of them and what the status will be in the future.
John, there were statements that were made yesterday by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and also NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has made a similar statement today. He says that Wagner Mutiny demonstrates Russia's weakness. What do you make of that statement?
I don't think I could put it any better than Mr. Stoltenberg did. It is a demonstration of the weakness. It is further clear evidence that the war was a mistake, that it should not have started, and this is leading to division in the Russian people. I think that the latest surveys show that public opinion in Russia is, it has been in favor of the war. That is changing a little bit, but it is still very much that since they are in the war, it is preferable to finish the war successfully than to lose. So how that will affect it, we will see. But undoubtedly, a visible division amongst Russian forces is a sign that things are weakening on that side.
All right. I've been talking to a senior policy director for the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation in Washington, D.C., John Ereth. Thank you very much for talking to WION World is One today.
You're very welcome.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.